Good morning and welcome to today's BIC streams in collaboration with Nature Conservation Foundation and Season Watch. Fabulous photosynthesizers, how plants have been modifying and getting modified by climate change like no other organism. Joining us today is Geeta Ramaswamy from Seasons Watch. She will tell us a little bit more about Seasons Watch and take us through today. Before I hand over to Geeta, if you are here for the first time and are not signed up to our mailing list and want to receive updates from us, you can do so by visiting our website and signing up from our website, or you can follow us on our social media channels as well, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So with that, welcome everyone. Thank you so much, Seasons Watch and Geeta, for doing this for us. And over to you, Geeta.
Thank you so much, Raghu. Thank you so much, Bangalore International Center, for giving us the opportunity to talking to all of you on this nice Sunday morning in Bangalore. I hope you have a hot beverage or some nice snack to accompany this talk. My name is Geeta. I am project manager at Season Watch, and more about this in a little bit of detail later on in this talk. And I will quickly start my presentation. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, and I'm also switching off my video while this talk happens. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about fabulous photosynthesizers. You know, the average person does not find a plant interesting. It's just a green thing sitting there doing nothing, not moving, maybe flying a bit in the wind, but not really doing much beyond that. But as a person who has studied plants for most of my life, I would beg to differ. Plants are fascinating creatures, and I hope to change some of your ideas about plants in this talk today. Firstly, there is no escaping plants. They are everywhere. In fact, they're one of the most widespread life forms on Earth. Today, if you look out into your balcony or outside your balcony on the roadside, you will see a plant. It might be flowering, it might be something that looks pretty and that appeals to your eye, to your aesthetic sense. Today at breakfast, you would have surely eaten a plant. At lunch, you would surely be eating a plant product. You might be wearing something that is made out of a plant. So this over here is the cotton plant, and the fibers from the fruit are what are made into all these cotton clothes that we wear. You might be sitting at a desk or on furniture that is made of wood that came from a plant. Last week, when there was a little bit of a relaxation from the lockdown, maybe you went to a park, maybe you sat under the shade of a tree and breathed in the wonderful oxygen that the tree was creating as a byproduct of its life's daily routine. And you might have enjoyed sitting and experiencing that. Basically, plants are there everywhere. There is no escaping them. And some of the most interesting plants that have invaded human lives are flowering plants. Typically, the things that you see around yourself are flowering plants. Are there any non-flowering plants in the world? Let's take a quick, I'll start with a little bit of a quiz if you all are familiar with flowering plants. I have here pictures of 3 plants, ferns, pines, and cacti. And if you can all just quickly type into, respond on the poll on which of these you think is a flowering plant. And I'll give you maybe 10 seconds to respond on this. Your time starts now. Great, time's up. Can we have the results, please, of this poll? Ah, that's wonderful. So 75% of you correctly identify that cacti have flowers, but pines and ferns do not have flowers. So let's do a little bit, a very short botany lesson on what are plants and then what are flowering plants, what are non-flowering plants, right? A plant is anything that photosynthesizes. It basically uses the energy of the sun and converts carbon dioxide that is present in the air into the chemical energy of food, which it stores typically in the leaves and other structures of the plant in the form of sugars. Plants come in a variety of shapes and sizes and kinds. Plants are unicellular, free-floating, aquatic. Plants can bunch together and form colonies like you see in this picture over here. Plants like ferns and mosses are really small. They don't have flowers, and they have something called spores from which new plants are formed. They grow close to the ground typically. Then there are large majestic trees like the pines, which is a group of plants called gymnosperms. Also, they don't flower, and they produce something called cones. And within the cones directly, the seeds of the plant are made. And these are what give rise to new plants. So this diversity of forms, from algae, ferns, moss to gymnosperms, all non-flowering plants, are actually pretty rare compared to the most widespread, most abundant plant life forms on earth, which is the flowering plant, like the cacti that you see here. Little bit of, we'll go into the history of the earth now. You might all know that the earth is very old. It's 4.5 billion years old. Somewhere along the very tumultuous history of the earth, where a lot of geological, chemical, and environmental changes have taken place, the first plants came into being and created this incredible atmosphere, which was rich in oxygen, which is a byproduct of photosynthesis, and which made life possible for every other organism that depends on oxygen for life. So if you look at this slide itself, you can sort of see a progression of how plants would have evolved in form from many millions of years ago to the present day. So we can imagine some of the more primitive plant forms to be unicellular and aquatic and dependent on water for completing their life cycles. From there on, we might have found life forms like the ferns and like the mosses, which dependent on spores to produce new plants. And from there on, we find woody species like the gymnosperms, which could grow tall because they had woody tissue in their anatomy, and they could conduct water from below the soil all the way to the tips of their leaves. And finally, the great diversity of flowering plants, which are the most abundant of the modern day plants. Okay, another quick little quiz about the history of plants. Do you all think that some types of plants have gone extinct before humans came into the world? So if you can quickly answer this question. Your time starts now, 10 seconds. All right, time's up. Can we have the results, please? Yes, most of you have guessed correctly. It is true that many types of plants have gone extinct before humans. You know, why this question is interesting is because all of us know about the dinosaurs. All of us usually are aware about the animal forms that went extinct, but there are a whole bunch of plant forms that also went extinct. Shall we look at a couple of examples? So in this slide, you can see two types of plants that were present on the Earth's surface about 350 million years ago. So, okay, before 350, between 500 and 400 million years ago, plants were not very complex organisms. They were very simple organisms, and they had just about moved from their aquatic water habitats onto the land. And why did they move to the land? Land was a great place because there was lots of carbon dioxide, which is present in the air. Carbon dioxide is not so great. The content is not so great inside water because carbon dioxide has to dissolve in water for it to be accessible to plants. But outside of water, it's there everywhere in the air. The other thing that's accessible is sunlight. So for photosynthesis, sunlight is required. So it was great. It was a very sensible move for plants to move out of water and onto the land. But the first land plants that were there were again really small, tiny. They didn't have specialized tissue that could extract water from the soil and provide it to the tips of the leaves which were of the plant. And therefore, these plants could not grow very tall. But in the era of geological time, which is known as the Devonian period, a number of plants were able to evolve these adaptations where they formed specialized tissue that could extract water from the soil and bring it to the tips of the branches of the tree, of the plant form. And they managed to grow really, really tall. They managed to become the size of trees. This plant form on the left that you see, this is something called a scale tree. A scale tree was able to grow up to 80 feet tall or 30 meters tall. And it could accomplish this fantastic feat by not having any wood at all, actually. What it did was it sort of supported itself on older, dead leaves, older leaves that, grew and then they fell off, and they left behind a structure that looked like a scale, and they sort of stacked one on top of the other and were able to attain great height in that way. Here, this particular photo is of a fossil scale plant. And can you see the hive-like arrangement of these scales or the remnants of the leaves? And this was great supporting structure for the plant. The other really cool plant that evolved during this time was this plant known as Archaeopteris, not Archaeopteryx, the animal. This is Archaeopteris. This is a plant, and it is one of the first plants to have specialized tissue that could conduct, even the scale trees had specialized tissue that could conduct water, but these were, the Archaeopteris was one of the first plants to have woody tissue. So it was basically certain types of cells which were fortified with certain types of chemicals, and this could help the plant become sturdy, and therefore it could grow very tall. Even these plants grew very, very tall, up to 30 meters tall. So what is the big deal about these extinct plants? Some of these earliest land plants were able to cause catastrophic changes in the Earth's climate at the time when they were so abundant. So you're all aware that in this present day and age, the climate change that we all talk about is in terms of climate warming. That on average, the Earth's surface temperature is increasing every day. And that has grave consequences for everything, right? From ecology to food production to human health. Everything can get affected by the increasing temperature, increasing global temperature. In the geological history of the Earth, though, climate changes has been most catastrophic when the opposite trend has occurred. That is when the climate has actually dramatically cooled down as opposed to dramatically warming up. So about 350 million years ago, you can imagine the Earth went from being covered by really tiny plants that didn't grow very tall, and suddenly into these huge plants, these tall plants, and a variety, a diversity of these types of plants. And they were really successful on land because they could withstand desiccation, because they could, draw in water from the soil. So that was a great advantage that they have. So they were very successful. And these plants also spread through something called spores, not seeds as how plants spread today, but through spores. And these adaptations were so successful that the entire land masses got colonized by large tracts of forests of this kind. And what did that do to the climate? There was suddenly like this landmass covered with a huge carbon dioxide sponge, which was just extracting carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and trapping it in the woody part of the plant, which takes, and the plant has to die for that carbon dioxide to be released back into the air, right? It's trapped there. So these land sponges just mopped up all the CO2 from the air, and CO2, everyone knows, is a greenhouse gas. And once the level of CO2 plummets in the atmosphere, the greenhouse gas effect is reduced, And what that induces is plummeting of global climate, global temperature. So actually the earth cooled down very dramatically because of the carbon dioxide trapping mechanism of these plant forms 350 million years ago. In fact, some people speculate that the second mass extinction event that happened in the history of the earth was caused because of these large tracts of these woody forms of trees. So that's strange, right? We don't really associate plants with causing climate change in the present day and age. But in historical time, plants have managed to have really large impact on the climate of the earth. But anything and everything that survived these events, all the plants that managed to survive those events, of course, the two plant examples that I gave you, both of them are extinct. You don't find either of them in the present world today, and they're long extinct. They were extinct millions of years ago. But they paved the way for the ancestors of the current day. So all the diversity of the wonderful plants that you see, all the way from cacti to large grasses like bamboo, to carnivorous plants, plants that have to actually eat animals to survive, even those are flowering plants, and aquatic plants which grow in water and produce flowers to produce seeds, etc. And the plants that we are most familiar with, trees, grasses, things that we see in our gardens. So thanks to millions of years of evolution and plants adapting to the way the climate has changed, we have this current bounty and diversity of wonderful plants all around us. The other thing that plants have managed to do over their evolutionary history is to make alliances and associations with other living things. Now, when you think of a herbivore, typically you think of a cow or a goat, but anything that can eat plant material is actually a herbivore. And some of the most dramatic herbivores in the world are actually insects. They eat a lot more plant material than most of the other types of animals that eat plants. This spectacular, colorful animal over here is an animal called the painted grasshopper, or Poikiloceras pictus. And what you see it's feeding on is milkweed. These are present day, by the way, they are extant. We can see them in our backyards today, these associations. So this Poikiloceras pictus eats the milkweed, but there's a twist here. The milkweed is actually packed full of all kinds of toxic substances that actually should prevent it from getting eaten. But some animals like this painted grasshopper have learned how to manage these toxic substances, and in fact, sequester them, sort of hold on to these toxic substances in their own body, and also display to all kinds of predators that, oh, please don't eat me. I'm so colorful because I'm packed full of all kinds of toxic things that I've eaten from this plant. These sorts of associations take many thousands, many millennia actually to evolve. They don't evolve overnight. They take a long time to evolve. So when you see a herbivorous insect eating a plant, you can imagine the amount of historical time that has gone into this association forming. The other association that flowering plants have formed with animals is by giving them all kinds of rewards to transfer genetic material from one plant to another. And this they do through pollinators. So plants, flowering plants, many of the flowering plants that we are familiar with have big showy flowers, white, yellow, orange, pink. They are very attractive to look at, but the plant is not really making the flower for humans to find it attractive. They are making flowers for pollinators to find it attractive, because when pollinators, pollinators come to flowers because they want an energy reward. They want some sugar, some protein to eat so that they can carry on with their lives. So when the pollinators try to access this bounty, this reward in the form of nectar in flowers, a lot of pollen rubs on them, and then they can take the pollen from one flower to another flower and ensure that genetic material is transferred between plants, and that results in seed set for flowering plants. And this again is an old association. This association in some plants is so specific that they cannot do without a specific type of pollinator being present in the environment. I'll give you a very small and quick example. The fig trees that you see, the banyan trees or the peepal trees that you see in your backyard, they have a certain type of flower that can be pollinated only by a certain species of animal called fig wasp. So these associations, this plant pollinator association is again so specific that if the fig wasp were to disappear, the plant will never get pollinated, and which might even lead to extinction of that plant in the future. Now, once the seed is set, what do plants want? Plants want to, ensure that the seeds get to a place where they can germinate and they can thrive and become new plants. So seeds are basically a way by which plants expand in range. Although we think that plants are static in one place, but the seed is a mechanism by which plants can actually move. So a parent plant is rooted in one place, but its seed can actually travel to a different place and germinate there and produce more plants over there, right? So this is how plants expand in their range. And many plants have learned to cover their seeds in lovely, sugary, fleshy reward that animals like this bird, like this red-whiskered bulbul like to eat. And what they're doing is, in consuming the flesh of the plant, they're also consuming some of the seeds. And the seed basically sits in the bulbul's stomach till it's actually pooped out somewhere else. And getting pooped out is a great thing for the seed itself, because a seed that gets eaten by a disperser like this bird and gets pooped out somewhere else has a better chance of germinating and becoming a new plant than another seed which has, say, fallen under the tree, encased in the same fleshy exterior as the other seeds. So great. So these three types of associations that you see actually have an evolutionary history. The plants and animals have been sort of shaking hands on this reciprocative interaction for many thousands and millions of years. And this present day arrangement that we see is actually a result of long historical periods of time. Okay, enough about the history of the earth. Let's fast forward to, let's fast forward to the current day and age. What I'm going to show you is a bunch of trees that you will encounter in your backyard, in your avenue. These are very typical Bangalore trees. And quickly, if you know their names, then great. If you don't know, take a guess. And I'll tell you a little bit about these trees and what to look out for when you look at these trees next time you go out. So, okay, here's your first tree. Can we have the poll up, please? Yes, you have 10 seconds to answer what tree is this, and time starts now. All right, time's up. Can we have the results? Hunge tree. Yes. So nearly 60% of you said that this is a hunge tree, and that is the correct answer. The scientific name of this tree is Pongamia pinnata. It's not a very big tree. It's a smallish, compared to many of the other tree species that you might find in Bangalore, it's a sort of a shortish tree. It is deciduous in some parts of Bangalore, which means that in the dry season, that is typically between end December and beginning April, in this duration sometime, trees might shed their leaves completely or partially, and the tree will look very dry. And just before the onset of, and at the end of the dry season, they will put out new leaves and flowers, which are very pretty to look at. This on the right here is what the fruits of the hunge tree looks like. And many of you might be aware that the oil that is extracted from, that people actually collect the seeds of this tree for the oil that can be derived from the seeds of this tree. This tree is a native tree, which means that it has evolved in this region, which is the southern Asian region, and it's native here. It's evolved here over historical time. This tree has been present in this region for a very long time. Okay, second question. What is this coronavirus like flower and what is this tree? Can we have the poll up, please? Your time starts now, 10 seconds. All right, time's up. Can we have the results? This is very nice. It's really nice that 75% of you were able to correctly identify this as the Kadamba tree. Lovely. This is a nice big evergreen tree. It's very beautiful tree to look at. If you were to find it in a garden, it's very easily recognizable because of the straight stem that goes quite straight up, and all the branches that appear to come out at 90-degree angles from the main bark. And the flowers look like little puffs that are hanging from the tree when it's in flower. It's really lovely to look at. And this on the right is actually a fruit, a young fruit, which is just about to get ripe. And you might see bats coming and eating these fruits. This might be attracting bats. This tree, the Kadamba tree, or Neolamarchia kadamba, is a native tree. It's native to the southern Asian region, and historically it has been present in this region. So it's a beautiful, lovely, wonderful tree. Okay, what is this tree? Time starts now. All right, time's up. Can we have the result? Rain tree, that's right. So 61% of you have identified this tree correctly as the rain tree. Not very difficult, right? It's pretty much everywhere in Bangalore. It's very easy to recognize because of its beautiful umbrella-like canopy. Many of the big main roads in Bangalore would be really tremendously hot if it weren't for the rain tree being present along the avenues. And this on the right is just the pods, which they're very squishy and smelly when they fall to the ground, and they make quite a mess. The rain tree, or the scientific name is Samania saman, is not a native tree. It is not from this region of the world. It's actually from tropical America. And it has been planted in Bangalore because it grows fast, provides a lot of shade. So it's been planted there for those reasons, and it also has pretty flowers. So it's been planted there for this reason. So by the way, I said that the association with dispersers has evolved through time, and that is true for many animals. In the present day and age, there is no disperser like the human being, because human beings can actually carry seeds over saltwater bodies like large oceans, in ships, in airplanes. And they can take things from a place that is really far off to a new place in no time. So this has actually led to a bunch of problems, because some of these non-native species have sort of run amok and created lots of problems in the places where they have been introduced. But fortunately, some of these non-native trees, which have become a part and parcel of city life, are providing a bunch of some positive effects, especially in urban places like cities, like shade and greenery, those kinds of things. Okay. Sorry, yeah. What is this tree? Your time starts now. Okay, time's up. Can we have the results? Yes, very correctly identified by 88% of you. This is the Champaka tree, or the Michelia champaka. It's a very beautiful, big, stately tree. It's an evergreen tree. It usually has green leaves all the time throughout the year. And the flower has this particularly beautiful heady fragrance, right? You can smell a champaka tree before you see it, and the smell carries very far, and it's such a lovely fragrance. If you were to notice the champaka outside your house, and if it has fruits, and if they are open, then you will see that the seeds are covered in this red colored coating, and which birds tend to find very attractive. So many birds like crows and mynas and the occasional squirrel will be hanging around in your champaka tree trying to get at these seeds. Champaka is also native. It has evolved in the South Asian region, and it's found across India. And you're very likely to see it in gardens and in avenues across India. Okay, next tree. What is this tree? Time starts now. Okay, time's up. What's the answer? Golden shower trees is actually incorrect. But okay, I did a little bit of cheating, and from this distance and this perspective, maybe the tree does appear to be like a golden shower tree. But the correct answer is actually Caribbean trumpet tree. This particular species is a very common avenue tree in Bangalore. It's planted pretty much everywhere, in most gardens, along many streets you'll find it. The scientific name for this tree is Tabebuia aurea, and it's actually a non-native species. It has come from tropical America. It has been planted here for its, of course, spectacular flower show that it puts up. Usually, after dropping off all its leaves, it's fully deciduous, it drops off all its leaves, and then it puts out these beautiful yellow trumpet-shaped flowers. And they're quite a sight to behold. I think some streets in Bangalore are also fully lined with this, so they all flower at the same time. So the whole street is just yellow in color because of this tree. And the fruits of this tree are interesting because when they split, there's a bunch of winged seeds that are arranged inside, and they just fly out when this particular fruit splits. Animals can't eat this fruit because it's something that dries up and shrivels up and breaks open to release the seeds. This particular tree basically relies on wind for its seeds to move from one place to another. Okay, last tree. What is this one? Your time starts now. All right, time's up. What are the results? Yes, correctly identified by 67% of the people. This is the Nagalinga Mara, which is actually in the English common name for this tree is the cannonball tree. These are the fruits of the cannonball tree, and they look like cannonballs, and they're quite big in size. They're huge, heavy fruits. This tree is again deciduous. It's a big tree, and it can be deciduous. It can shed most of its leaves during the dry part of the dry season. And the flowers are particularly spectacular. They're huge and weird, and they remind people of the Shivalinga. So that is why this tree is known as the Nagalinga tree. This tree you would think is native to India because it has an Indian name. It has a local name in Kannada, but actually it's not native. It's come again from tropical America and planted again for its beautiful appearance and beautiful flowers. So yeah, so these were some of the trees that you for sure would have seen, and you all already knew the names. So I hope you have got a little bit more information about all these trees that you already know about during this little quiz. So we've looked at how plants have, evolved with other animals over time, how plants appear, how certain types of trees appear, and what types of flowers, fruits, and leaves they have. The leaves, flowers, and fruits that we typically see on flowering plants, especially many tree species, are very seasonal. That is, when a tree decides to shed its leaves is determined by what season it is. Typically, trees in, let's say, the Bangalore region will shed their leaves, which are the trees which are deciduous, will shed their leaves only in the dry season. You will not find trees shedding leaves during the rainy season. right? Other trees like this, actually, this is the golden shower tree here. This is a tree called Cassia fistula. And when this tree flowers, again, it's in the deciduous state. Usually all the leaves are shed before the flowering happens, and the entire tree is covered in flowers. So this is also very seasonal. Some trees do not flower throughout the year. They flower only in particular times of the year. And if they flower only in particular times of the year, then you can expect that the fruits, the seeds set from those flowers and the fruits that appear on the tree are also extremely seasonal, right? Everybody's favorite summer fruit is mango. I'm yet to meet a person who does not like mango. And you will find it particularly odd if you were to eat a mango in let's say December, right? Mango is a ripe, delicious, seasonal mango is one that you get between April and June in Karnataka. And anything outside of that is just not as tasty, right? So there is a particular time when species fruit, and this is again, it might be because of the environmental factors that ensure that that seed gets dispersed at the time when the fruits come on the tree in the most effective and efficient way possible. So now that this is known as phenology, by the way, when the appearance of leaves, flowers, and fruits, which is seasonal and cyclical. Every year you expect the tree to do pretty much the same thing, go through the cycle of producing new leaves, producing flowers, producing fruits, and then do nothing for a little bit of time, and then again pick it up again in the next season, right? So this phenomenon is called phenology, and phenology is extremely sensitive to the climate and the changes that are happening in the climate. So climate change actually affects plant seasonality. And let me give you an example. And this example is from the temperate regions. It's from Northern Europe, where a certain type of plant grows, which is known as the oak plant, oak tree. There are many species of oaks found across the world. They are very abundant in the temperate latitudes, in northern latitudes. If you want to see an oak tree in India, you'll have to go to the Himalayas. You don't typically find oak trees below that latitude. It needs that cold, higher latitude to be able to grow properly. So some species of oak, this particular species of oak does something called a bud burst. What is a bud burst? Basically, it's a deciduous tree. In the winter season, it sheds all its leaves because it's just not possible for a tree to sustain itself in that cold time. So it tides over the cold time by losing all its leaves during the autumn season. And then throughout the winter season, there'll be no leaves. And then there is the onset of spring in the northern latitudes, where the temperature starts getting warmer each day, right? And the trees are able to detect this warming in the temperature, and they quickly put out new leaves as soon as they detect this warming temperature. And we know that if there are leaves, if there is food to be eaten, then there are herbivores that will eat that food, right? So the timing of the bud burst in the oak is synchronized with the timing of egg laying and hatching in a particular species of moth called the winter moth. And this winter moth, typically the caterpillar will hatch out of the eggs as soon as the bud burst happens, and it has a huge bounty or feast to get through the spring to quickly chomp up the leaves. And that's great for some species of passerine birds, which happen to nest around the same time that these changes happen in the tree and in the caterpillar. So when the new fledglings hatch, when the new babies come out of the eggs, they have lots of plentiful food to eat in the form of the caterpillars. This is a very nice little food chain that has been very well studied and described in the northern latitudes. But slowly, as the climate warms, as the climate changes, what is happening across the world, and especially in the northern latitudes, is that the season the duration of the season is changing. So the winter season is actually getting shorter, and the spring season and the summer season are getting longer, which means that the onset of spring, the onset of warm days is advancing than what was earlier known. So what happens? The trees are immediately responding to this. They are detecting warmer days earlier, and they are putting out new leaves much earlier than before. Um, I think, I'm not sure about this date, but at least 5 to 10 days earlier than before. Now, you might think 5 to 10 days earlier than before is not such a big deal, right? It's just 5 to 10 days. But 5 to 10 days is tiny in the lifespan of a human being. We, on average, live 70 years. But imagine an insect like a winter moth, which might not live more than a few months. 5 to 10 days and might be very critical for their survival, because that duration in which the larva needs to feed to become an adult, if it misses that window where it can feed on new leaves, then that the species is doomed, right? The larva will never be able to, the larva will starve and there'll be no adult. So what is happening now is that as the bud burst advances, the winter moth have slowly learned to hatch earlier. So they are sort of keeping up with this earlier bud burst that is happening, and there has been a little bit of an advancement in when the larvae hatch. So most of the caterpillars are not going hungry, they are actually getting food to eat. But what's happening to the birds? Birds are more long-lived than insects. They can't really quickly tweak their, their life's histories such that they can start nesting earlier than before. So the birds, it seems that maybe in a situation where they nest much later, they're not keeping up with the bud burst that is happening in the oak and the hatching of larvae in the winter moth, and they might actually be starving. Some of the fledglings might even be starving because they're just hatching much later. So what is happening at the scale of the earth, at the scale of the climate, is actually affecting the food chain in certain parts of the world, and that's quite worrying. But this is from like the temperate regions of the world. If you look at the tropical regions of the world, where Bangalore is, where you and I live, we don't have any such information. There's very little information on when trees are flowering and fruiting, much less what is happening to other organisms that depend on these leaves, flowers, and fruits for their life cycle. And for this reason, we have a citizen science project called Season Watch, where any person who is interested in recording and reporting when a tree has leaves, when it has flowers, and when it has fruits, can contribute this information. And when this data is collected over long enough time, we can actually, find out patterns that are happening in this region of the world. How a tree is responding to seasonal change in temperature, rainfall, etc., and how like larger climate change events such as global increase in temperature is affecting these patterns. I will end with a nice little story from Season Watch. Just south of where you live is the state of Kerala. And Kerala has they celebrate their new year typically in the month of April, usually 14th or 15th of April. And this is a festival called Vishu. And traditionally, historically, this festival has been associated with the flowering in the species Cassia fistula, or the golden shower trees, a golden showers tree. And people expect the trees to be full of this flower during the time of Vishu. But what has happened over the past few years is that people have been noticing that there are no flowers. There are not enough flowers during the Vishu festival. And because the flower is used during the festivities, people particularly notice. And incidentally, people have also been contributing data, lots and lots of data on this particular tree species from Kerala. These dots that you see are the locations of the trees from which Season Watch has got information on the flowering duration of Cassia fistula in the state. And what we found that the trees seem to be behaving very aberrantly. Most trees, there's a population of trees that are monitored, let's say 100 trees. Of that, a small proportion, up to 20 to 30% of trees always have flowers throughout the year. Whether it's the expected season or not, they tend to have flowers. And in the expected season, like in April, it seems like the 40 to 60% of the trees are flowering just before Vishu. So during Vishu, there is less flower, and just before Vishu is when a lot of flowering is happening. So we have some evidence from season watch itself that actually maybe in some tropical species like the like the golden showers tree, there's actually an advancement in when the tree flowers. And we don't have any answers to why this is happening. Is it because of climate change? Is it because of the soil? Is it because of when it rains? These things we don't know yet. That's because we have just now realized that this is a pattern, and now we need to explore it further, explore the reasons behind this further. So I will conclude here. The world has had a very long history, and plants have played an extremely important role in shaping the world the way it is today. The way the living organisms are able to survive on this world is all thanks to plants. And plants have been instrumental in climate change in the past. And in this particular time period when humans are creating all the changes in the environment that is leading to climate change of a different sort, let us all join hands and in understanding how trees are responding to climate change in the present day and age. Thank you, and I'll take questions.
Thank you so much, Geeta.